He stopped her forced wedding. Then the Apache swore she'd be his wife. The sun was just beginning to rise over the small desert town, painting the sky in soft shades of pink and orange. The heat of the day had not yet arrived, and the town was still quiet, except for the occasional crow calling from a distant tree and the soft murmur of early risers starting their daily routines. In the middle of the town, a small house stood with whitewashed walls that had faded from years under the sun. Inside that house, a young woman named Elena moved quietly, trying not to make any noise. Her heart felt heavy, and her mind was crowded with thoughts she could not share. Today was the day that would change her life, though she wished it would not. Elena had grown up in this town, a place where everyone knew everyone else, and where traditions were followed strictly. From the very beginning, she had learned that family decisions were never her own. Her father, a stern man who believed strongly in honor and reputation, had always made the rules, and she had always followed them. Her mother was softer, gentle, and kind, but she had never argued with her husband. Elena had learned to keep her feelings quiet, to smile when she was sad, and to obey even when she disagreed. But this morning her heart felt heavier than ever. Her wedding was scheduled for later that day. Not a wedding of love or choice, but one arranged by her father, with a man much older than her. The man, a wealthy rancher, lived in a town a few miles away. He had property, money, and a respectable name, and for Elena's father, that was enough reason to force the marriage. It would bring stability and pride to the family, and that was all that mattered. Elena had tried to speak up once, to ask if she could have a say, but her words had been brushed away like dust in the wind. No one had listened. As she dressed in the plain white gown her mother had carefully prepared, Elena felt a cold knot in her stomach. The gown was beautiful, with delicate lace along the edges, but she could not see the beauty. She only saw the chains it represented. She stared at her reflection in the mirror, her brown eyes wide and anxious, and wondered how she had come to this moment. How had her life, which had once felt full of possibilities, become a series of rules she had no power to break? Her mother, sensing the tension, gently brushed a strand of hair from her daughter's face. "You look beautiful, Elena," she whispered, her voice soft but trembling. I just want you to be happy." Elena nodded but said nothing. Her mother wanted her to smile, to feel joy, but Elena felt only fear and sadness. She could hear the distant sound of horses approaching, signaling that guests were already on their way. The town would soon gather, and everything would be set into motion. Her life would be given to a man she barely knew. The thought made her chest tighten, her hands tremble, and tears prick at the corners of her eyes. Outside the house, the town was slowly waking. Merchants opened their shops, children ran through dusty streets, and neighbors exchanged greetings and gossip. Everyone seemed to be talking about Elena's wedding. Some spoke with excitement, some with curiosity, and some with judgment. Weddings were important events in this town, and everyone wanted to know the details. But no one seemed to care what Elena herself wanted. No one thought to ask if she was ready or willing. Elena's father entered the room suddenly, his tall figure casting a shadow over her. His face was stern, his jaw tight. "Are you ready?" he asked, though his voice carried no warmth. "The guests are waiting. The groom is ready. It's time." Elena swallowed hard. I'm ready," she said softly, though her voice did not match her heart. She felt trapped, as if she were standing on a cliff with no way down, forced to leap into a future she did not choose. Her father nodded, satisfied with her words. "Good. Remember, a woman's duty is to obey and honor her family. You will learn your place soon enough." Elena's heart ached. She wanted to speak, to argue, to tell him that she did not belong to anyone, that her life was hers to choose. But the words caught in her throat. She had learned long ago that resistance brought only anger and punishment. She could not risk it. Not yet. As the time of the wedding approached, Alina sat quietly, listening to the preparations outside. The town was buzzing with excitement. Musicians were tuning their instruments, friends and neighbors were gossiping and laughing, and the air smelled of fresh bread and coffee. But inside her heart, Alina felt only emptiness. She had grown up imagining love as something bright and free, but now she realized it might never come for her. Then, just as she was about to leave the house, a shadow fell across the doorway. She looked up and saw a figure she had not expected. Daniel Reyes, known by everyone as Apache. Daniel had been away for many years, traveling across deserts and mountains, learning about life and people, becoming a man known for courage and fearlessness. Alina had known him as a child, had played with him in the fields, and had admired his strength and kindness. But now, seeing him again, she felt a spark of hope she had not felt in years. Daniel's eyes met hers, steady and intense. He had heard about the wedding, and something in him could not allow it to happen. He had returned to town just in time, driven not by selfish desire, but by a... He understood her fear, her sadness, and the unfairness of it all. He approached her quietly. "Alina," he said, his voice calm but firm, "are you truly ready for this?" Alina shook her head slightly, unable to speak. She wanted to tell him everything, how scared she was, how trapped she felt, how she had never wanted this life. Daniel did not push. He simply nodded, as if he understood perfectly. The noise outside grew louder. The wedding guests were arriving, and the ceremony would begin soon. Elena's heart pounded. She felt caught between two worlds, one of duty and fear, the other of hope and courage. She had never been given a choice before, and she did not know if she could take one now. Daniel stayed near her, a silent protector. He did not interfere yet, but his presence was enough to remind Alina that she was not completely alone. For the first time in weeks, she felt the stirrings of strength within her. Maybe, just maybe, she could find a way to change her fate. As the sun climbed higher, casting a golden glow across the town, Alina took a deep breath. The doors of the house opened, and the music from the wedding outside drifted in. She looked at Daniel one last time, and he gave her a small, reassuring nod. In that moment, Alina realized something important. No matter what happened, she had a choice, even if it was the smallest one. She could speak, she could resist, and she could hope. With her heart pounding, she stepped toward the door, ready to face the crowd, ready to face the future, whatever it might hold. She did not yet know what would happen next, but for the first time she felt the possibility of freedom. The streets outside were filled with townspeople, their faces bright with curiosity and excitement. Elena felt their eyes on her, some friendly, some judging. She held her head high, walking with the quiet determination that Daniel had inspired in her. She did not know if anyone else in the town would support her, but she knew that she would not walk alone. And as she approached the chapel where the ceremony was about to begin, Elena felt a strange mixture of fear and hope. The wedding that had seemed inevitable was now uncertain. Someone had come to stand by her, to remind her that her life was hers, not anyone else's. And for the first time in a long while, Elena allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, things could be different. Elena stepped out of the small house and into the bright morning sunlight. The town streets were alive with energy. People were dressed in their finest clothes, talking and laughing. though their eyes kept darting toward the chapel where the wedding was about to begin. Horses pawed at the ground as riders arrived, and the scent of flowers mixed with the dusty air. Elena's heart raced. Every step she took toward the chapel felt heavier than the last. Her white gown rustled softly, and she felt as though the weight of the future was pressing down on her shoulders. She tried to calm her thoughts. I can do this. I have to. There is no other way. But even as she told herself this, doubt crept in. She had never faced a moment like this before, where so many eyes were on her, waiting for her to act according to someone else's wishes. She felt as small as a leaf in a storm, yet deep inside a spark of courage flickered. Just then, a shadow fell across the street. Elena looked up and saw him. Daniel Apache Reyes. He had arrived quietly, without fanfare, but his presence seemed to pull the energy out of the crowd. Daniel had always had that effect on people. He didn't need to shout to be noticed. The moment he appeared, everything seemed to slow down for Elena. She felt a strange mixture of relief and fear. Daniel's eyes locked with hers. He didn't rush toward her or speak loudly to attract attention. Instead, he moved calmly through the crowd, his boots kicking up small clouds of dust. His expression was serious, but it held warmth. Elena felt her pulse quicken. She had known Daniel as a child, admired him from afar, and even though years had passed, she still felt a connection she couldn't explain. As Daniel approached, the chatter in the town seemed to fade. People noticed him and whispered among themselves. Some recognized him from his younger days, when he had been adventurous and fearless. Others remembered the stories of his travels through the desert, learning from different communities, surviving dangers, and always returning with wisdom. He had earned the name Apache because of his courage and the respect he commanded from those around him. Elena's father noticed Daniel too, and his face darkened. "What is he doing here?" he muttered to himself. There was anger in his voice, but also a hint of fear. He knew Daniel was not a man to be ignored. Daniel stopped a few steps away from Elena. He looked around the crowd, seeing the anticipation and judgment in their eyes, and then he turned to her. "Elena," he said softly, but firmly, "are you really ready for this?" Elena shook her head, her voice caught in her throat. She wanted to tell him everything, all the fear and pain she felt, but the words would not come. She could only stand there trembling, letting her eyes speak for her. Daniel took a step closer, but he did not block her way or force her to move. He simply stood there, steady and patient. "You don't have to do this if you don't want to," he said quietly. "No one should ever force you." His words were like a cool breeze in a scorching desert. For the first time that day, Elena felt a sense of hope. Someone was giving her a choice. Someone was willing to challenge the rules of the town, challenge her father, and challenge the expectations placed on her. The crowd began to notice the interaction. Whispers spread like wildfire. Some people gasped, shocked that Daniel dared to interfere with a wedding arranged by a respected family. Others looked at Elena with curiosity, wondering if she would finally speak up for herself. Her father's face turned red with anger. He stepped forward, his voice booming. "Daniel Reyes, you have no right to interfere. This is a matter of family and tradition. Leave at once." He stood tall and calm, his gaze fixed on Elena. "I'm not here to fight," he said. "I'm here to ask one simple question. Does she want this?" The question hung in the air, heavy and impossible to ignore. No one had asked Elena that before. Not her father, not her family, not even the man she was supposed to marry. And now, standing in front of the whole town, Daniel had asked. Elena felt all eyes on her. She could hear the whispers, the shocked gasps, and the murmurs of disbelief. Her heart pounded in her chest. For a moment, fear almost silenced her. But then she remembered Daniel's calm, steady presence, and she felt a surge of courage. "No," she said, her voice soft but clear. "I do not want this marriage." The crowd went silent. Her father's face turned pale with shock and fury. The man she was supposed to marry stood frozen, his pride wounded, unsure of how to react. Guests whispered among themselves, some in support, some in disapproval. But Elena no longer cared about their opinions. She felt a sense of liberation she had never known before. Her father's voice grew louder, trembling with anger. "You will do as you are told. This is your duty. You will marry him." Daniel stepped forward, placing himself between Elena and her father. He did not raise his voice. He did not make threats. He simply looked at her father with unwavering determination. "No one should ever marry out of fear," he said. "If she does not want this, it will not happen. Not today, not ever." Some nodded quietly, understanding the truth in them. Others whispered angrily, feeling that tradition had been insulted. Elena felt a mixture of fear and relief. Her father might be furious, but for the first time, she knew she had someone on her side. The groom, realizing that Elena would not consent, turned red with embarrassment and anger. Without a word, he stormed out of the chapel, leaving the guests stunned. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Some murmured quietly to themselves. But Elena felt a sense of triumph. She had said no. She had refused, and she had been heard. Daniel turned to her, his expression softening. "You don't have to do anything you don't want to," he said gently. "I will not let anyone force you." Tears welled up in Elena's eyes. For years she had been silent, obedient, afraid, and now, in front of the whole town, she had spoken, and someone had listened. She felt a rush of gratitude and something else, something deeper, stronger. For the first time, she felt seen, understood, and supported. The crowd slowly began to disperse, leaving Elena and Daniel standing alone in the chapel. The sun shone through the open doors, casting long shadows on the dusty floor. Elena took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the day lifting slightly. She realized that she had a choice, a real choice for the first time in her life. Her father, furious but powerless in the moment, shouted one last warning before storming out. Elena did not watch him go. She focused on Daniel, who had stayed by her side without ever imposing his will. He had given her space to make her own decision, and in doing so, he had shown her what true courage and respect looked like. Daniel looked at her quietly. "You don't have to decide anything now," he said. "You have time. I will not leave you alone, but I will not force you either. This is your choice, and your choice alone." Yelena nodded, feeling a mix of relief, fear, and excitement. The path ahead was still uncertain. Her family might be angry. The town might gossip. But for the first time, she felt a sense of freedom. She could breathe. She could think. She could hope. How? As the day went on, Elena walked through the empty streets of the town, her white gown brushing against the dusty ground. The music and laughter from the failed wedding slowly faded into the distance. Daniel walked beside her, not speaking, simply offering silent support. The wind carried the scent of desert flowers and the promise of something new. Elena realized that she had always dreamed of a life where she could make her own choices, and now, for the first time, that dream felt possible. She did not yet know what the future would hold, but she knew she was not alone. She had someone who respected her, who believed in her, and who would stand by her side. The sun began to set, casting a golden glow across the desert landscape. Elena felt a sense of calm she had never known before. The fear and uncertainty were still there, but they were tempered by hope and courage. She had taken the first step toward a life that was truly her own, and she knew that she could continue to take each step, no matter how difficult. For the first time in her life, Elena felt free. After the wedding day had collapsed in chaos, Elena and Daniel left the town together. The streets were quiet now, the chatter of gossip fading into the distance as the sun climbed higher in the sky. Elena's heart was still racing from everything that had happened, but she felt a strange mixture of relief and hope. She had spoken her truth, and someone had listened. She had refused the marriage that had been forced upon her, and for the first time in her life she was choosing her own path. Daniel led her down a narrow, dusty road toward a neighboring community where he had lived for some years. It was not far, but the journey felt long because every step brought Elena further away from the life she had known and closer to a future she could shape herself. Along the way, Daniel spoke little, allowing her time to think, to breathe, and to process everything. But his quiet presence was comforting. She knew he would protect her if anyone tried to stop her, yet he did not try to control her. That balance gave her strength she had never felt before. The journey also gave Elena time to reflect on her life. She thought of her childhood, of the books she loved to read, of the dreams she had quietly nurtured but never shared. She remembered the long afternoons spent imagining a life where she could make her own decisions, travel, learn, and love freely. All those dreams had seemed impossible in her small town where tradition and family honor ruled every action. But now, walking beside Daniel, she began to believe that those dreams could come true. When they arrived at the community, it was quieter than her town, but it had a sense of life and warmth. People greeted each other on the streets. Children ran and played in open areas, and the air smelled of fresh bread, flowers, and the desert itself. Daniel took her to a modest home he had built for himself. It was simple, with a small garden and a porch that looked out over the desert hills. It was not luxurious, but it was safe, and it had a feeling of freedom that Elena had never known. "You'll stay here for now," Daniel said gently. "Take your time. You don't have to decide anything right away. No one will force you, and no one will judge you here." Elena nodded, overwhelmed by gratitude. She had expected to feel fear, but instead, she felt a strange peace. She had escaped the wedding that had threatened to trap her, and she had found someone who treated her with respect and patience. For the first time, she felt like she could breathe, like she could think, like she could plan a life that belonged to her. Over the next few days, Elena began to adjust to her new surroundings. She explored the community, meeting neighbors and learning about the way of life there. Unlike her hometown, this place valued independence, honesty, and mutual respect. People worked hard, but they also treated each other with kindness. Elena began to feel a sense of belonging she had never experienced before. She also started to think about what she wanted for herself. For years, she had followed the expectations of others. She had done what her father wanted, what her family expected, what society demanded. But now, she realized that she could choose. She could study, work, travel, and live in ways she had never been allowed to before. The possibilities felt endless, and though the freedom was new and a little frightening, it also filled her with excitement. Daniel, meanwhile, gave her space to find herself. He never pushed her, never pressured her, and never made her feel obligated. He continued to work on his small farm, tending animals and growing food, always nearby but never intrusive. He allowed Elena to settle in, explore, and make decisions for herself. Over time, his steady presence became a source of comfort. She began to trust him, not just as a protector, but as someone who genuinely cared for her well-being. Despite the peace she found in this new place, Elena's past was never far behind. Rumors of her refusal and escape spread through her hometown. Messages from her father arrived, demanding she return and accusing her of bringing shame to the family. Some community elders came, scolding her for rejecting the marriage. Elena felt a mixture of anger, sadness, and fear. She realized that stepping away from her old life did not erase the consequences of defying it. But Daniel remained steadfast. He faced the critics with quiet strength. When some townspeople spoke harshly of Elena, he did not respond with anger or threats. Instead, he calmly declared that no one should ever be forced into a marriage or a life they did not choose. He made it clear that Elena's choices were her own, and no one had the right to take them away. The courage he showed inspired Elena, giving her even more strength to stand tall in the face of criticism. Over time, Elena began to take small steps toward independence. She started working with children in the community, teaching them to read and write. The work brought her joy and a sense of purpose. For the first time, she felt that she could contribute to the world in a meaningful way. She also began to explore her own interests, reading books that she had longed to read, learning about the world beyond her hometown, and discovering talents and passions she had never realized she had. Through it all, Daniel remained a quiet presence in her life. He never demanded her attention, but he was always there to support her. He listened when she needed to talk, offered advice when she asked, and protected her when danger or criticism arose. Elena began to realize that Daniel's respect and patience were rare. He did not see her as someone to control or claim. He saw her as a person with her own thoughts, feelings, and desires. That realization deepened her admiration and trust for him. Despite her growing confidence, Elena still struggled with fear. The memory of her father's anger and the gossip from her hometown weighed on her. There were days when she doubted herself, wondering if she had made the right choice, questioning whether freedom was worth the risk. But Daniel's unwavering support reminded her that she had made the decision for herself, and that was the most important thing. One evening, as the sun set over the desert, painting the sky with shades of gold and orange, Daniel spoke to her about the future. "Elena," he said gently, "you have faced more than most people in your life. You have shown courage by standing up for yourself. You don't have to decide about marriage or anything else yet. What matters is that you live your life for yourself." Elena felt tears prick at her eyes. His words were not grand or dramatic, but they carried a truth she had never known before. She realized that she had spent her life living according to other people's expectations. Now, she could start living for herself. The thought filled her with a sense of hope and excitement she had never felt before. Days turned into weeks, and Elena grew stronger and more confident. She found joy in small things, the laughter of children, the warmth of the sun, the quiet beauty of the desert at night. She began to dream again, imagining a future filled with possibility and freedom. And slowly she began to understand her own strength. She realized that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to face it and continue moving forward. Through it all, Daniel never rushed her or tried to influence her decisions. But one evening, after seeing the way she had grown, he spoke to her gently. "Elena," he said, "I will always stand by you. I will not force anything, but I hope that one day you will choose your life with me in it." Elena felt a mix of emotions: gratitude, surprise, and something she could not yet name. She realized that she cared for Daniel deeply, but more importantly, she respected him. He had given her freedom, space, and respect, and in doing so, he had shown her what true love could be. It was not about control or possession. It was about support, patience, and understanding. Despite her growing feelings, Elena knew she had to focus on herself first. She could not let fear, guilt, or past expectations dictate her life. She had to continue building her independence, learning about herself and exploring the world around her. But now, she also allowed herself to hope. Hope that one day she could choose a life filled with both freedom and love. And so, Elena continued to grow. She learned to trust herself, to value her own voice, and to stand tall in the face of criticism. She discovered the joy of making her own decisions and the power that came with taking control of her life. And through it all, Daniel remained by her side, not as a master or a guide, but as a friend, protector, and supporter. By the time the sun rose over the desert months later, Elena had become a new person. She was no longer the quiet, obedient girl who had lived in fear of her father's decisions. She was strong, confident, and full of hope. She had faced the impossible, stood up for herself, and discovered the power of choice. And though the future remained uncertain, she knew one thing for certain: she would never again allow anyone to make decisions for her life. Time passed, and life in the small desert community had become a rhythm for Elena. The mornings were filled with golden sunlight spilling over the hills, the afternoons with the laughter of children she taught, and the evenings with the calm hush of the desert as the sky blushed with pink and orange. For Elena, every day was a chance to live her life on her own terms, something she had never experienced before. Yet, despite the peace she had found, her heart was quietly pulled toward a decision she had not yet made. She thought often about Daniel. His presence in her life had been steady, patient, and kind. He had never pressured her, never forced her, and never made her feel that she owed him anything. Instead, he had given her something she had never had before: freedom. And yet, freedom alone did not quiet the feelings growing inside her. She realized she cared for him deeply. His respect, courage, and honesty had touched her heart, but more importantly, he had helped her discover the strength within herself. Elena spent her days teaching children and learning new things herself. She read books about faraway lands, about people who had faced great challenges, and about women who had fought for their own voices. Every story filled her with inspiration. She realized that her own life could be more than a series of rules imposed by others. It could be full of choices, adventures, and love, all guided by her own heart. But even as she found joy and purpose, the memory of her past life lingered. She thought of her father, of the townspeople who had watched her refuse the forced marriage, and of the man she had been expected to marry. She wondered if she had done the right thing, if she had offended her family too greatly, and if the town would ever forgive her. The doubts sometimes weighed heavily, but Daniel's quiet support always reminded her that she had made a brave and honest choice. One evening, as the sun began to sink behind the desert hills, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple, Elena found herself walking alone along a small path near the community. The wind whispered through the sagebrush, carrying the smell of wildflowers and the warmth of the earth. She felt the solitude of the moment and realized how far she had come. She had chosen freedom. She had taken control of her life. And now there was another choice to make, one that would shape the rest of her life. Daniel approached quietly, his boots making soft impressions in the sand. "You're thinking," he said gently, as if reading her mind. Elena smiled faintly. "I am," she admitted. "I think about everything. My past, my choices, the future, everything." He nodded, sitting beside her on a flat rock. "It's natural," he said. "You've grown so much. You've learned who you are and what you want, and now you can decide who you want in your life, if anyone." Elena's heart tightened. She looked at him, really looked, and saw not just the man who had protected her, but the man she had come to admire and trust deeply. She realized that she could love him not because he had saved her, but because he had never tried to control her. He had given her respect and freedom, and in return, she had come to feel a love she had never known before. For days, Elena thought about what it would mean to choose Daniel as a partner in life. She imagined the quiet mornings together, working on the land, laughing with the children, and sharing stories beneath the endless desert sky. She imagined traveling, learning, and dreaming alongside him, not because she was forced, but because she wanted to. The idea filled her with warmth and joy, but also with nervousness. Choosing love was different from choosing freedom. Love required trust, courage, and the willingness to open one's heart fully. Finally, one evening, as the sky turned deep purple and stars began to shimmer like diamonds across the desert, Elena found Daniel sitting on the porch of his small home. The air was cool and fragrant with the scent of desert flowers. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment, and sat beside him. "Daniel," she said softly, "I have thought a lot about everything. About my life, my freedom, and about you." He turned to her, his expression calm, waiting for her to continue. "I realize something important," she said, her voice growing stronger. "You have never tried to control me. You have never pressured me. You have given me the space to be myself, to make my own choices, and to find my own strength. And I think I want you in my life, not because I have to, but because I choose to." Daniel's eyes softened and a small smile appeared on his face. "Elena," he said gently, "I've waited as long as you needed. I never wanted to rush you. I wanted you to choose freely, with your whole heart." Elena reached out and took his hand. It was warm and steady, grounding her in the moment. "I choose you," she said, her voice clear and confident. "I want to share my life with you, to face the future together, but only because it is my choice." Daniel's smile grew broader, and he squeezed her hand gently. "Then we will walk forward together," he said. Always with respect, always with freedom, always with love." The stars above seemed to shine brighter that night. The desert was quiet, peaceful, and full of promise. Elena felt a sense of happiness and contentment that she had never known before. She had faced fear, rejected a life that was not hers, discovered her own strength, and finally chosen love freely. It was a victory not just for her heart, but for her entire spirit. The next few months were filled with preparation and quiet joy. Elena and Daniel planned a simple wedding, one that reflected their values and their love for each other. It was not grand or extravagant, but it was full of warmth, laughter, and community support. Friends from the neighboring town and the community where they now lived came to celebrate. Even some from her hometown, who had initially criticized her, came to witness her courage and the happiness she had found. On the day of the wedding, Elena felt a sense of calm excitement. She wore a simple white dress, elegant but unpretentious. Her hair was braided loosely, adorned with small flowers from the garden. She felt radiant, not because of appearances, but because of the joy and peace she carried in her heart. She had chosen this life, this love, and this moment. Daniel waited for her with the same calm and steady presence that had been with her since the beginning. He looked at her with admiration and deep affection, recognizing the strength it had taken for her to reach this point. "Are you sure?" he asked gently, though he already knew the answer. Elena smiled and nodded. "Yes, this is my choice." The ceremony was simple heartfelt, and beautiful. There were no forced smiles, no expectations imposed, no fear, only people who respected them and celebrated the courage it had taken to choose their own path. They exchanged vows that spoke of respect, freedom, support, and love, promises that were real, sincere, and freely given. As they stood together under the desert sky, hand in hand, Elena felt a sense of completion she had never known before. She had faced the impossible, defied tradition when necessary, discovered her own power, and found a partner who would respect her for the rest of her life. The sun set, casting long shadows and bathing the world in golden light. The future was open, full of possibilities, and entirely theirs to shape. In the years that followed, Elena and Daniel built a life together filled with respect, love, and shared dreams. Elena continued teaching children, exploring new ideas, and strengthening her independence. Daniel remained her protector, companion, and partner, always supporting her choices and encouraging her growth. Together, they faced challenges, celebrated victories, and built a life rooted in freedom, trust, and mutual respect. Elena's story became an inspiration for many. People in both her hometown and the neighboring communities spoke of her courage, her determination, and the love she had chosen freely. She was no longer just a girl who had been forced into a life she did not want. She had become a symbol of strength, hope, and the power of choice. And through it all, Daniel remained by her side, the man who had never tried to control her, the man who had protected her, respected her, and waited patiently for her heart to choose. Together, they proved that true love is not about possession or control, but about freedom, respect, and partnership. Elena had finally found a life she could call her own, a love she had chosen freely, and a future full of hope, courage, and endless possibilities. And as the desert winds whispered around them, carrying the promise of tomorrow, she knew that she had lived her truth and embraced her destiny. A life defined not by fear or obligation, but by choice and love.